Hi guys, welcome back. Today we have lesson number 4. We're going to talk about rivers, deserts, and coastline of the United States of America. So, before starting, let me show you something. I made this information and I have to separate and split them in three parts. So, we have rivers, then we have desert, and last one we have coastline. Right. So inside them we have classifications of everyone. For example, we have classification according to the region. For example, rivers in East Coast, Midwest, South, West Coast, Alaska, Hawaii, for example. And then another kind of classification, major rivers. There are Mississippi. This is only one classification and the major. Another type of classification, heritage rivers, federally designed wild and scenic rivers, and national wild and scenic river system. What I'm trying to say is there are a lot of ways to classify the rivers, and desert, and coastline, and so on. To the end to the At the end to the this lesson we have important and interesting facts and figures about it. So let's start it. Well, as I was saying, we can categorize first according to the region. So, region are East Coast, Midwest, South, West Coast, Alaska, Hawaii. In East Coast, we have the Hudson River. It's in New York. And then we have the Potomac River. Also, in this document, you can see some characteristic or some feature about every item we have here. And of course, we have examples of each one. In the Midwest, we have Mississippi River. Mississippi River are multiple states like Minnesota, Louisiana, and of course Mississippi. Ohio River. This one goes through Ohio and Kentucky. Continue to the south, we have again, in this case, we have continue to the south, we have the Missouri River, of course, multiple states. Then we have Rio Grande or Rio Grande. It's in Texas, New Mexico, and as you can see, for part of the US Mexico border. To the west coast, we have the Columbia River, Colorado River. You can see characteristic of any of them. And significance flow through 7 US states, including the Grand Canyon. Also, you can find some challenges. Of course, I was I'm just naming some important. We all know they are a lot of rivers. So we will talk about the main important. In Alaska, we have the Yukon River, one of the longest river in North America. Hawaii, Wailua River or Kauai. Then, as I said before, we have other kind of classification. Major rivers. The major rivers would be Mississippi, Missouri, Ohio, Columbia, Colorado. Here we can talk about a little about the Mississippi River, about the land, significance. The land approximately 2,320 miles, and Missouri River about 2,341 miles. Third kind of classification is the Heritage River. We can find here St. Croix, St. Croix or St. Croix in English, St. Croix in French, National Scenic Riverway. So Heritage River are designed to protect and celebrate outstanding rivers resources. And Hudson River. We can find here historical significance and environment concerns. Other kind of classification, federally designed wild and scenic rivers. We can find here Rogue River in Oregon. Here we can talk about the protection, hydraulic power, some migration. The next one, National Wild and Scenic River System, could be a sub-classification from federal designing wild and scenic rivers. Here we can find Missouri in California, Columbia River. As you can see, there are a lot of rivers, and of course, there are a lot we don't have here. But don't worry, we're just talking about the main important. So we can continue now with desserts. As you know, United States home to several desserts, each with its own unique characteristic. So here is a list of major desserts in the United States. Categorized again by region. So we have the Southwest region, Southern Desert. It's going to be in the state like Arizona, California, and southern part, and of course Mexico. Also, we have a new item here, notable features. Then we have the Mojave Desert. Just go to the again to California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah. Notable feature. It is the Death Valley, the lowest point in North America and Joshua Tree National Park. Next region, in the Mountain West, we can find here the Great Basin Desert. This could go to Nevada, Utah, Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming. This is a cold desert. And the solar region, we can find here Chihuahuan Desert. These go to the Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and of course Mexico. In this part of the lesson, desert, remember we can find a lot of places like Mexico because usually deserts are located between Mexico and United States. And you notice here we have another kind of classification, and this time it is colors. Rivers, sky blue, and desert uh, could be a kind of orange. Well, this classification could be in a hot desert and cold desert. Hot desert we can find Sonora, Mojave, Chihuahua. Of course, characteristic principal characteristic high temperature, low precipitation. And we can find the opposite here, cold desert, the Great Basin. Of course, they have cold winters, low temperatures. Next, cold desert ecoregion. This could be a sub classification from this. So, these speak about the unique climate, rare plant species, challenges, conservation efforts. And then we have again the major classification, major desert. Sonora Desert and Ohio Desert. Our kind of classification we can find rain shadow desert and semi-arid desert. In rain shadow desert we can find again the Great Basin Desert and the Chihuahuan Desert. And of course the Mojave Desert. In semi-arid desert we can find the Sonoran Desert. Well, as you can see, this classification is according to the climate. Now we can continue with coastlines. The United States has an extensive coastline featuring diverse landscape along the Atlantic, Pacific, Gulf, Mexico, and Alaskan shores. His a list of major coastlines in the United States categorized again by regions. We have East Coast, West Coast, Gulf Coast, Alaska Coast, Hawaiian Coast. In the East Coast, we can find Atlantic coastline. This one go to the state Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. These specific characterized by low lying plains and Burial Island. Then we have the West Coast. The West Coast, we can find the Pacific coastline, aka Pacific Rocky Coast. Here got to Washington to California, featuring rock cliffs and coastal mountain. If you want to know or remember about mountains, please go to the video of lesson 3. We were talking about the Appalachian, Rocky Mountain, in Sierra Nevada. The Pacific coastline again have a subdivision, Pacific Northwest Coast. Remember, it's according to the region. Then we can go to the Gulf Coast. We have the Gulf of Mexico coastline. This is actually is very known for warm waters and extensive wetlands. This one go to the state of Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas. Here we can find some items talking about ecological diversity and economic importance. Why is it very important? Because it's home to major ports and plays a significant role in the U.S. oil and gas production. Then we have the Alaska, aka Alaska Fjord Coast, the intricate network of fjords on coastal feature in Alaska. They have fjord glaciers on diverse range of marine terrestrial system inside Passage Gulf of Alaska. The last one we have the Hawaii, aka Hawaiian tropical coast. We can find here very coastal landscape across the Hawaiian island. And that island are Hawaii, Maui, Hawaii, and Kauai. The feature here are the volcanic cliff, coral reef, and tropical beaches. Absolutely different from the previous one, the Alaska coastline. As you can see, we have other kind of classification of the coastline. We have the water island, the story, coastal plain, and the coastal wetland. In the water island, we can find other banks in Carolina. They act as a natural buffer, protecting the mainland from storm surges and providing unique habitat. Then we have the story, the Chesapeake Bay. Stories like Chesapeake Bay serve as vital nurseries for many marine species. Let's go to the coastal plain. We have the Atlantic coastal plain. Broad flatland with a mix of wetland, forest, and agriculture areas. And the last classification we have again the Chesapeake Bay wetlands. It was here because it has ecological importance, conservation project, a lot of project to restoration efforts post the water horizon oil spill. Right. To end this lesson, we have now important and interesting facts and figures. As I said before, everything green is about coastline. So the longest coastline. Alaska has the longest coastline among U.S. states with approximately 6,640 miles. Also, we can talk about the erosion, the preservation, hurricanes. The Atlantic coast, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico, is susceptible to hurricanes. Tourism. Coastal areas like Cape Cod in Massachusetts are popular tourist destinations. The Barren Island migration. We were talking about this minutes ago. They are like those of the coastal Louisiana, undergo dynamic processes, including migration and erosion. Another interesting fact about rivers, navigation. This is very important to the worldwide for transportation, supporting commerce and trade from the Midwest to the Gulf of Mexico. To the management, the Tennessee Valley Authority (TVA) plays a key role in managing rivers, providing flood control and hydroelectric power. Conservation, conservation partnership and ecology. Non-profit organizations such as American Rivers collaborate with communities to protect and restore rivers across the country. Recreation. The Colorado River through the Grand Canyon is a popular destination for river rafting enthusiasts, offering both challenging rapids and stunning. So very competitive in terrains. And of course, we have restoration project and pollution mitigation. They're very important because they focus on restored habitat of the fauna and flora. And the last one, we can we can have here some interesting fact about the desert. For example, the biodiversity. Despite arid conditions, U.S. desert like the Sonoran Desert boasts diverse plant and animal species. And adaptation, the Joshua Tree found in Moses Desert is known for its unique appearance and adaptation to arid conditions. This is a night sky and astronomy observatories. This is actually it's very cool because in the US, Southwest deserts such as Southern Desert are very known for their clean night skies. So this attracts every astronomer and stargazers. So this could be home to world observatory due to clear night skies and low light pollution. The wildlife adaptations. This is related to biodiversity and desert adaptation. The rattlesnake have bold, unique adaptation to survive in arid conditions such as efficient water conservation. Then we have the national parks, Death Valley, Saguaro. They have the unique landscape and biodiversity. And the desert renewable energy initiatives that are becoming focal points of renewable energy projects, including solar and wind farms contributing to sustainable energy goals. Right. So now I would like to show you some videos speaking of the major rivers, the major desert, and the rival versus, let's say, between the east coast and the west coast. So let's watch them.
Hi, welcome friends. Today we are going to talk about rivers of United States of America, that is USA. There are many rivers in America which are of international significance because of their largeness or longest rivers such as Mississippi, Missouri, Colorado. So we are starting with Mississippi. So from the north it comes down south into the Mexico Bay and falls into the Atlantic. This is Mississippi River. This is one of the longest rivers, Missouri, and Mississippi is a big basin which is very significant for American economy, agriculture, and climate. So it joins Mississippi. Missouri starts from the north and joins Mississippi. And these rivers are not standalone, they have tributaries. Yellowstone River joins Missouri. North Platte River joins Missouri, which in turn joins Mississippi. So this will be helpful for you to, and this is Wisconsin joining Mississippi River. Illinois River joining Mississippi, tributary of this Mississippi. So such large rivers are there which are part of Mississippi. Ohio River, which comes from all the way west down to join Mississippi River. You can see the course, and this course is exact, not to the exact, but certainly nearly to the exact, however the river looks. So Tennessee River joining Ohio. It is tributary of Ohio, and Ohio in turn is tributary of Mississippi. River Arkansas joins Mississippi. Canadian River, of course, people will be surprised that there is a river named Canadian in United States, which is a tributary of Arkansas River. Red River joining Mississippi at the end. This is a major rivers of United States which are centrally located, Missouri and Mississippi and its tributaries. Colorado River going towards Mexico, then joining Pacific. Its tributary Gila River. This is Rio Grande, which also borders between Mexico and United States. State particularly is Texas majorly, which is bordering to this, and it's part of United States. Texas is, as you know, it's parts of United States. So now we are going towards New Jersey area, Connecticut River, then Hudson River, Potomac, PD River which joins Atlantic. All these rivers are joining Atlantic. They are not any tributaries, they are independent rivers. So they join Atlantic. Savannah. There is a small St. John's River in Florida which joins Atlantic. Alabama River, Pecos River joining Rio Grande, it's a tributary of Rio Grande. Brazos joining directly to Mexico Bay, that is Atlantic, part of Atlantic. Now coming to the west side, Snake River, which is part tributary of Columbia River. Columbia River all comes all through Canada and joins USA, and it flows till Pacific. Klamath River, Sacramento River. Now we are going towards Alaska. From Canada, a river flows into Alaska which is called Yukon, and there is another significant river, Colville, north of Atlantic, and these join Arctic Sea because these are above the Bering Strait. So friends, if you like this video and if you think it's very helpful for your studies and understanding rivers of United States, please do like it, share it, subscribe to the channel. And if at all you want other countries' rivers, how they are flow, which way they flow, and all those understandings, you can see our videos from the playlist. Thank you.
Although many people visualize deserts as dry, desolate wastelands, the term actually defines a wide spectrum of landscapes and plant and animal population densities. The common denominator of all deserts is extreme aridity. Water is freely available only for short periods following rains. Desert is often defined as a place that receives less than 10 inches of annual average rainfall. A concise, non-technical definition of a desert is a place where water is severely limiting to life most of the time. Though desert plants and animals must cope with scarce water, the common perception that they are struggling to survive is grossly inaccurate. The native biota is adapted to and usually thrives under these conditions, and in fact, most of the species require an arid environment for survival. Look at it this way: if a desert received much more rain, it wouldn't be a desert. A different, wetter biome would replace it. Thus, an alternative and more positive definition might be: a desert is a biological community in which most of the indigenous plants and animals are adapted to chronic aridity and periodic extreme droughts, and in which these conditions are necessary to maintain the community's structure. The desert biome requires chronic aridity, but not all of its component species do. North America has 4 major deserts. They are as follows: the Great Basin Desert, the Mojave Desert, the Chihuahuan Desert, and the Sonoran Desert. 3 of them are found here in Arizona. All but the Sonoran Desert have cold winters. Freezing temperatures are even more limiting to plant life than is aridity, so colder deserts are poorer in both species and life forms, especially succulents. The Great Basin Desert is both the highest elevation and northernmost of the 4 North American deserts, and has very cold winters. The seasonal distribution of precipitation varies with latitude, but temperatures limit the growing season to summer. Vegetation is dominated by a few species of low, small-leafed shrubs. There are almost no trees or succulents and few annuals. The indicator plant, the most common or conspicuous one used to identify an area, is big sagebrush, which often grows in nearly pure stands over huge vistas. Such cold shrub deserts in the Old World are called steppes. The Mojave Desert is characterized largely by its winter rainy season. Hard freezes are common, but not as severe as in the Great Basin Desert. The perennial vegetation is composed mostly of low shrubs. Annuals carpet the ground in wet years. Few succulents and trees grow there. The only common tree species is the characteristic Joshua tree, a tree like yucca that forms extensive woodlands above 3,000 feet in elevation. Though the Chihuahuan Desert is the southernmost North American desert, it lies at a fairly high elevation and is not protected from Arctic air masses by any barrier, so hard winter freezes are common. Its vegetation consists of many species of low shrubs, leaf succulents, and small cacti. Trees are rare. Rainfall is predominantly in the summer, but in its northern reaches there is occasionally enough winter rain to support massive blooms of spring annuals. Despite the cold winters, the Chihuahuan Desert is rich in species. The Sonoran Desert, as currently defined, covers approximately 100,000 square miles and includes much of the state of Sonora, Mexico, most of the southern half of Arizona, southeastern California, most of the Baja California Peninsula, and the islands of the Gulf of California. It is lush in comparison to most other deserts. The visually dominant elements of the landscape are 2 life forms that distinguish the Sonoran Desert from the other North American deserts, one being legume trees such as the Palo Verde, mesquite, and ironwood trees, and also large columnar cactus such as the saguaro and the giant cardones of Mexico. It is also home to about 130 species of mammals, more than 500 kinds of birds, 20 amphibians, 100 or so reptiles, and 30 native freshwater fish. Perhaps as many as 2,500 native species of plants occur within the Sonoran Desert proper. So there you have it, the 4 major deserts of North America.
The East versus the West coasts. First, it's important to point out that the two coasts are, together, the most developed and rich regions of the country. When you compare each, or the two together, with the country's interior, the numbers speak for themselves. The biggest example is population, with the vast majority living in these areas. But comparing the coasts with the interior would be a little boring because the coasts would do better in pretty much all factors, so I want to take into account the two of them and answer the question, how do the east and west coasts of the US compare? The first differences we should take into account are, I think, geographical and territorial ones. As the name indicates, the west coast is in the west and the east is in the east. The east coast borders the Atlantic Ocean and Canada, while the west borders the Pacific Ocean, Canada, but also Mexico. Being 3 hours ahead, the east coast technically has 14 states, very closely related to the initial 13 colonies that rebelled against the British and first established the United States. One exception, among others, being Florida, which was still Spanish at the time. For this video, I chose to include Pennsylvania and Vermont, making the total of the East Coast 16. I know they're not on the East Coast itself, but it makes sense to me to include them on this list. While the West Coast only has 3 states, some people include Nevada and Arizona in their West Coast concept, but I didn't in this video, and the official West Coast is also made up of Alaska and Hawaii, which I equally didn't include. Interestingly, all of Florida is further south than California. I don't think we can really get this perception when looking at maps. When it comes to size and population, the size of the East Coast is over 1 million square kilometers, made up of the states of Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And its population is around 130 million, almost 40% of the United States' total population. The West Coast size is smaller at 863,000 square kilometers. Now, it is smaller, but not that much smaller, which means that these 3 states are much bigger than many of the other 16. And its population is around 50 million, less than half, almost only 1/3 of the East Coast's, only 15% of the country's total. It's interesting that the sizes aren't that different, with the East only being slightly bigger, but much more populated, showing us how population density in the East is much higher than the West. This map of population density demonstrates that there's a lot more green areas in the West. The whole eastern area of the country is much more populated even. There's only a few urban areas in the middle and west of the country on almost a single strip of high density land in the West Coast. This likely has to do with the fact that the East was colonized first, and expansion moved in the direction of east to west. First the 13 colonies, then the territory ceded by the British, then the Louisiana Purchase, and then the Mexican cessions. This also justifies another difference between the coasts, which is the existence of older cities and structures. Universities, for instance, are much older in the East Coast, with some dating to the 18th century. California is the only US state in the West that was settled earlier than the rest, but still later than the whole of the East. When it comes to temperature, it varies somewhat equally as you go north and south of each of the coasts. The north is colder and the south is warmer. However, even if temperatures are similar, the weather types are different. In this map, we can see the Köppen climate types in each region. The Köppen climate classification is one of the most widely used systems, first published by German-Russian climatologist Vladimir Köppen in 1884. It divides climates into 5 main climate groups, with each group being divided based on seasonal precipitation and temperature patterns. Here we can see California is mostly Mediterranean type weather, Oregon is the same but less warm, while Washington is more oceanic. In the East Coast, the north is warm humid continental, with the rest being closer to subtropical, although these colors are a little confusing. We've looked at climate, weather, land, territory, organization, and population. So now, how do these people live in those areas? Politically, people on both coasts tend to be more progressive than the interior areas of the country. However, as you go further south in each of them, more conservatism also shows up. The states on the northeast coast are, in my opinion, some of the most progressive in the US, but California itself is as well. The whole of the West Coast has Democratic governors, which are also common in the northeast, while the majority of the East Coast has Republicans as governors, results that are similar in other types of elections. Economically, the West is more of a center for technological companies and new startups, while the East is more the financial center of the country, especially up north. The unemployment rate is something that changes all the time, but right now it seems pretty balanced between the two coasts. Regarding the GDP, in this map made by friend and partner of the channel, Statista, we can see the contribution each state makes, percentage-wise, for the national GDP. We can instantly tell that the East Coast has a higher GDP percentage than the West, again, 14 something states versus 3 is normal to be the case. But we must pay attention to California, with a GDP almost equivalent to the whole country of the United Kingdom, being the highest in the country and contributing 14% to the national value over New York and Florida combined. When it comes to HDI, the northeast coast is the most developed of the entire country, while all the west coast does pretty well too. The south, which also reaches into the east coast, is the area that does less well. Regarding salary, median monthly earnings are like this. The same thing happens. The north has a higher median income than the south in both coasts. The southern part of the east coast is the one with the lowest income. This is per household and not individual, by the way. But making a lot of money doesn't mean that much if the cost of living is immense. Salaries in New York might be higher, but so is the cost to rent an apartment. This map shows us the average cost of living, and in it we can see that in all of the west coast plus the northeast coast, the cost of living is over 100, which I think means on average it takes more to live than you can earn every month. But besides all these economic indicators, it's also important to take a look at the income inequality. Maybe there's a lot of money being made, but most of it is concentrated on a very small minority of the population. This map shows us that information. The Gini index is only reasonable in Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire. None of the West Coast is in the green either, with only Washington being okay in the yellow. Back in the East Coast, New York, Connecticut are the worst, along with Washington, D.C. When it comes to the population's characteristics, this map shows us the counties where non-Caucasian people have a high percentage of the population. Both coasts have a high population of Caucasians. Some locations where people of Asian descent are more common, although there are a lot more of these in the east than the west, but the real difference is in the south. In California, there is a high presence of people of Latino or Hispanic descent, something that is only common in South Florida, while the remainder of the southern East Coast has a high prevalence of African American people as well. This other map, focused on metropolitan areas, shows us how there are many more in the east compared to the west. Regarding religion, there are a lot of non-Hispanic Catholics in the Northeast, but also across all the West Coast. Hispanic Catholics are very present in South California as well. African American Protestants are almost exclusive to the southern East Coast, while non-Hispanic Protestants are pretty much overwhelmingly the majority across the East Coast, but also very present in Oregon and Washington. In this type of videos, we usually compare army sizes. Obviously, we can't do that here. With regions of the same country, they have the same army. But we can look at how many people are enlisted per state. In this map, that becomes evident. The East Coast clearly has more enlisted personnel than the West, which makes sense because they have more population. A lot of these maps end up showing us the whole of the US states, but I try to focus on the comparison between the ones on the two coasts, since that's what this video is about. So, that is how the east and west coasts of the United States compare in a few topics. Geographically, territorially, but also in other indicators like population, development, cost of living, GDP, among many others that shows us all the aspects in which the two sets of states differ. The comparison is a little unfair in some aspects. Despite their size being similar, the East has way more states and way more people than the West, and it was settled and developed much earlier in history. But still, the West has been able to surpass it in a few of these indicators.